You think you know BTS, their music, their tours, their billions in revenue? Sure. But do you know where their money actually goes? A former tax consultant just pulled back the curtain on something wild: hidden assets abroad. We're talking overseas properties, silent investments, and financial moves so quiet even hardcore fans miss them. So who's been building an empire in the shadows? Who owns assets in places you'd never guess? And who sits at number 1 as the ultimate silent mogul? From number 7 to number 1, every reveal will shock you. Let's go. Number 7. Jin. Okay, let's start this list with someone who literally nobody suspects. And honestly, that's exactly why he's dangerous. When you hear the name Kim Sek-jin, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Worldwide handsome, right? Maybe those legendary dad jokes? Maybe that iconic kiss he blew at the camera during the Grammys? Or maybe you think of the eldest Taehyung, who always keeps the mood light, the guy who seems more interested in cooking ramen on V Live than reading financial reports. And that, my friends, is exactly where you're wrong. Because behind that goofy, lovable exterior is a man who comes from a family that already understands money, real money, before BTS even existed. Let's rewind for a second. Jin's father is a former CEO, not a small business owner, not a mid-level manager, a CEO. That means Kim Sek-jin grew up in an environment where conversations about assets, investments, and long-term wealth weren't just dinner table talk, they were a way of life. And people forget this. They look at Jin and they see the funny guy, the visual, the one who makes everyone laugh. But what they don't see is a man who absorbed every single lesson about financial strategy from a household that already operated at a corporate level. Now here's where it gets interesting. After BTS exploded globally, every member received HYE shares. We all know that. But what most fans don't dig into is what each member did with that foundation. Jin, he moved quietly. Reports in Korean media have linked him to investments in the food and hospitality industry, specifically a high-end Japanese restaurant venture. And if you think that's just a cute little side project, think again. The global Japanese cuisine market is worth over $24 billion annually, and it's one of the most stable sectors in the food industry. Jin didn't just randomly pick a restaurant because he likes eating. This was a calculated move into a sector with proven international scalability. But the real question that tax consultants raise isn't about what's visible in Korea. It's about what's happening outside of Korea. See, when you operate in the food and hospitality space at a certain level, expansion becomes inevitable. And expansion means international partnerships, franchise licensing, supply chain agreements, all of which can involve assets held in foreign entities. A former tax consultant familiar with how Korean entertainment figures structure their overseas ventures pointed out something fascinating. Celebrities like Jin, who invest in industries with natural cross-border appeal like food and hospitality, often end up with asset footprints in countries like Japan, Singapore, and even parts of Southeast Asia. Not because they're trying to hide money, but because that's simply how the business operates. You set up a supply chain in one country, a licensing deal in another, and before you know it, you have financial interests spread across multiple jurisdictions. And here's the kicker. These aren't the kinds of assets that show up in flashy news articles. Nobody writes headlines about a licensing agreement in Osaka or a minority stake in a food distribution company in Singapore. They're boring on paper, but they're real, they're substantial, and they're quietly appreciating in value every single year. Now, let's talk about real estate, because this is where Jin's story gets even more layered. In Korea, Jin is known to have invested in premium real estate in the Hanam-dong area of Seoul, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the entire country. We're talking about a district where ambassadors live, where the ultra-wealthy park their money in properties that appreciate faster than almost any stock on the Kospi. His apartment purchases there have been reported in multiple Korean outlets, with estimated values in the billions of won. But here's what the former tax consultant highlighted. When someone already demonstrates that level of sophistication in domestic real estate, buying in the right neighborhoods, timing their purchases correctly, understanding the premium luxury market, it's almost guaranteed that they've explored international real estate as well. Countries like Japan, where Jin already has business ties through his restaurant ventures, offer incredibly attractive real estate opportunities for foreign investors, especially in cities like Tokyo and Osaka, where property values have been steadily climbing. And the legal framework in Japan actually makes it relatively straightforward for Korean nationals to acquire property. You don't even need residency, you just need capital and a good advisor. And Jin, he's got both. What makes Jin's position at number 7 so fascinating is that he's the perfect example of what tax consultants call invisible wealth accumulation. He's not buying Lamborghinis and posting them on Instagram. He's not wearing watches that cost more than a house. He's living modestly by superstar standards, cracking jokes, cooking on camera, and meanwhile, his financial portfolio is growing in places that most fans will never think to look. The food industry connections alone give him a natural gateway into international asset holdings, and when you combine that with his family's business background and his own real estate savvy in Korea, you've got someone who's quietly building a financial foundation that extends far beyond what the public eye can see. And honestly, that's the scariest kind of wealth. The kind that doesn't need to be loud, the kind that just sits there, compounding, growing, multiplying, while the owner is busy making you laugh with another dad joke about why the chicken crossed the road. So yeah, Jin opens this list at number 7, not because his assets are small, they're not, but because compared to what's coming next on this list, he's just getting started. The members above him, they've taken the concept of hidden international assets to a completely different level. But don't sleep on Jin. The guy who looks like he's just here for fun, he might be the smartest quiet player in the entire group. Now here's what I need you to think about before we move on. If the member at number 7 already has ties to international food ventures, premium Korean real estate, and a family background rooted in corporate leadership, what kind of financial empires do you think the members above him have built? What's hiding at number 6? And who's sitting there? Trust me, you're not ready for this one. Number 6. Jimin. Alright, now we're stepping into territory that's going to make you look at Park Jimin completely differently. Because let's be honest, when most people think of Jimin, they think of that angelic voice, those razor-sharp dance moves, the man who literally made Like Crazy hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 as a Korean solo artist. They think of the guy who radiates softness, who cries when fans sing his songs back to him, who gives gifts to everyone around him like money is just energy meant to flow. And that image, it's not fake. Jimin really is that generous, that emotional, that warm. But here's the part nobody talks about. Generosity on that level requires a financial engine most people can't even comprehend. You don't give the way Jimin gives unless there's a machine running behind the scenes that's producing wealth at a rate that makes the giving sustainable. And that machine? It's far more complex and far more international than anything fans have pieced together. Let's start with what's publicly visible, because even the surface level is staggering. Jimin has been one of the most aggressive real estate investors among the BTS members in South Korea. He purchased a luxury apartment in Hanam the Hill, and if you don't know what that is, let me paint the picture. Hanam the Hill is not just an apartment complex, it's a fortress of wealth. It's where Samsung heirs live. It's where K-drama legends park their fortunes. Units there regularly trade from anywhere between 5 to 10 billion won, and some of the premium penthouses go even higher. Jimin didn't just buy any unit, he bought into this ecosystem of ultra-high net worth individuals, which tells you everything you need to know about where his financial mind operates. He's not thinking like a pop star, he's thinking like old money. But Korea is just the starting point, and this is where the former tax consultant's insights get really spicy. See, Jimin's global profile exploded in a way that created financial opportunities most fans don't even realize exist. When Dior named him a global ambassador, not a Korean ambassador, not an Asian ambassador, a global ambassador, that wasn't just a title. That was a financial relationship that spans multiple countries, multiple currencies, and multiple legal jurisdictions. Brand ambassadorship deals at Dior's level involve contracts that are structured across multiple international entities. Payments might flow through French parent companies, be routed through regional offices in places like Hong Kong or Singapore for tax efficiency, and include clauses that involve equity participation, profit sharing on specific product lines, or even co-investment opportunities in brand ventures. The former tax consultant explained that when a celebrity reaches the level where they're the face of a house like Dior, a house that operates in over 200 markets worldwide, the financial architecture of that relationship alone can create asset footprints in multiple countries without the celebrity even actively trying. It just happens as a natural consequence of how global luxury brands structure their deals. And then there's Tiffany & Co., another global ambassadorship, another layer of international financial architecture. Tiffany, owned by LVMH, the same conglomerate that owns Dior, operates with a financial sophistication that most people can't fathom. When Jimin became the face of Tiffany's campaigns, he didn't just get a paycheck, he entered a financial ecosystem where compensation packages can include things like investment access to LVMH-affiliated funds, luxury asset allocations, and participation in brand equity programs that are domiciled in places like Luxembourg, Switzerland, or the Cayman Islands, not for shady reasons, but because that's literally how multinational luxury conglomerates operate their finances. Now, layer on top of that Jimin's solo music career. Face wasn't just an album, it was a global commercial event. When you chart #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the revenue streams that flow from that achievement are mind-boggling in their complexity. You've got streaming royalties coming from every country on Earth through different distribution entities. You've got sync licensing deals where your music gets placed in commercials, films, and TV shows across multiple markets. You've got performance royalties collected through international performing rights organizations in the US, Europe, Japan, and beyond. Each of these revenue streams can create taxable events in different countries, and to manage that efficiently, artists at Jimin's level typically set up collection entities or holding structures in jurisdictions that offer favorable tax treaties. The former tax consultant noted that this is standard practice. It's not evasion, it's optimization. But the result is that Jimin likely has financial entities or asset holding structures in places like the United States, Japan, and possibly European financial centers, simply as a function of how his income flows are managed. And here's the detail that really caught my attention. Jimin's spending patterns suggest a level of international financial comfort that goes beyond just tourism. He's been spotted wearing pieces and carrying items that are exclusive to specific international markets, the kind of things you don't just buy online, you buy them in person, in flagship stores, in cities where you have a presence. Multiple fan accounts have documented his movements through Tokyo, Paris, and New York with a regularity that suggests these aren't just vacation destinations, they're places where he has infrastructure. Whether that infrastructure includes owned properties, long-term leased residences, or simply financial accounts that facilitate his lifestyle in those cities, the tax consultant pointed out that all of these create what's known as beneficial interest in foreign jurisdictions, a technical term for assets that are connected to you even if they're not in your name. But what puts Jimin at #6 and not higher is interesting though. Despite all of these international touchpoints, Jimin's asset strategy appears to be more income-driven than investment-driven, meaning his foreign assets are largely a byproduct of his earning activities, rather than a deliberate investment strategy to acquire overseas holdings. He's making money everywhere because he's famous everywhere, and that money naturally creates international footprints. But the members ranked above him, they've gone a step further. They're not just earning internationally, they're actively building, acquiring, and investing in foreign assets with deliberate intent. That's the difference. Jimin is at #6 because the scale of his global brand partnerships, like Dior, Tiffany, Billboard charting music, creates a web of international financial interests that most people would need a forensic accountant to fully map out. He's not hiding anything in the traditional sense. He's just operating at a financial altitude where the money naturally disperses across borders, and the structures needed to manage that money are inherently international. The softness you see on camera, the tears, the hugs, the generous gifts, that's all real. But behind that softness is a financial profile that stretches from Seoul to Paris to New York to Tokyo, and the full picture of Jimin's overseas asset footprint is something that even dedicated fan accountants would struggle to piece together completely. So now you know who's at number 6, the face of Dior, the voice behind a Billboard #1, and a man whose financial tentacles reach further across the globe than his gentle image would ever suggest. But here's the question that should be eating at you right now. If Jimin, the emotional, giving, soft-hearted Jimin, already has this level of international financial complexity, what on earth is happening at number 5? Who's there and what have they been doing that puts them above a global Dior ambassador? Stay locked in. This list is just getting started.
Number 5. BTS V. Now this is where the list starts getting really fascinating, because if you thought Jimin's luxury brand connections were complex, wait until you hear what Kim Taehyung has been doing. And I need you to really pay attention here, because V's approach to wealth is so sophisticated, so unconventional, and so deeply under the radar that even the former tax consultant admitted he was genuinely impressed. Most celebrities hide their money in real estate or stocks. V? He hides his in plain sight, hanging on walls in galleries across the world. Let's set the stage. Kim Taehyung is not your average idol. You already know that. The man has an aesthetic sensibility that operates on a completely different frequency from everyone else in K-pop. While other idols are collecting sneakers and cars, V is walking through art galleries in Paris, attending private viewings in New York, and building relationships with dealers and curators in a world that most 30-year-olds don't even know exists. And here's what people outside the art world don't understand. Art isn't just culture. Art is money. Art is one of the oldest, most powerful, and most secretive asset classes on the planet, and V has been swimming in it for years. The global art market is valued at over $65 billion annually, and here's the thing that makes it absolutely unique as an asset class. It's one of the least regulated financial markets in the world. Unlike stocks, real estate, or even cryptocurrency, art transactions in many countries don't require public disclosure. You can buy a painting worth $10 million at a private auction and nobody, not the media, not the tax authorities in most jurisdictions, not the public, will ever know unless you choose to tell them. Art can be purchased through intermediaries, held in Freeport storage facilities in Geneva, Luxembourg, Singapore, or Delaware, and it can appreciate in value for decades without ever being reported as an asset on a standard financial disclosure. The former tax consultant explained that free ports, sometimes called free zones, are the art world's best-kept secret. These are ultra-secure, climate-controlled storage facilities located in tax-free zones where wealthy individuals store art, wine, gold, and other high-value collectibles. The genius of free ports is that as long as the art stays inside the facility, it exists in a kind of financial limbo. It's not technically imported into any country, so it doesn't trigger import duties, capital gains taxes, or in many cases even reporting requirements. You can buy a painting in London, ship it to the Geneva Freeport, let it appreciate for 10 years, sell it to another collector who also stores in the same Freeport, and the painting never physically moves. The transaction happens on paper. The money flows through international accounts, and the entire exchange exists in a shadow economy that is perfectly legal but almost entirely invisible to the public. Now, is there direct evidence that V uses free ports? No. But the former tax consultant pointed out something crucial. When someone demonstrates the level of art knowledge, art purchasing behavior, and art world access that V has publicly shown, it would almost be financially irresponsible for their advisors not to suggest free port storage for high-value pieces. It's standard practice for anyone collecting at a serious level. And V is collecting at a serious level. Multiple reports and fan-documented moments have shown V visiting major art galleries and exhibitions in cities like Paris, London, and New York. He's been photographed at Art Basel events, and if you don't know what Art Basel is, it's essentially the Olympics of the art world, where pieces change hands for millions of dollars in a single weekend. He's spoken openly about his love for specific artists and art movements, demonstrating a depth of knowledge that goes way beyond casual appreciation. This is a man who studies art, who understands art history, who can talk about composition, technique, and provenance with a fluency that would impress professional curators. And when you're at that level, you're not just looking at art, you're investing in it. But art is just one layer. Let's talk about Celine. V became a global ambassador for Celine, the French luxury house under the LVMH umbrella, the same conglomerate we talked about with Jimin's Dior and Tiffany connections. But V's relationship with Celine carries a different texture. Celine, under Eddie Slimane's creative direction, positioned itself as the brand for the intellectually cool, the quietly wealthy, the people who don't need to scream their status because it's embedded in every fiber of what they wear. That brand alignment with V wasn't accidental. It reflects who he actually is. And financially, that ambassadorship creates the same kind of international revenue architecture we discussed with Jimin. Payments flowing through French entities, regional offices handling Asian market activations, contract structures that span multiple jurisdictions. But here's what makes V's situation different from Jimin's. V's personal interests naturally pull him into asset classes that are inherently international and inherently private. Art, vintage collectibles, wine investments stored in bonded warehouses exist outside normal financial reporting. V has essentially built, whether intentionally or through the natural evolution of his interests, an international asset profile that is optimized for invisibility. Not because he's doing anything wrong, but because the asset classes he's drawn to are simply the ones that the global financial system doesn't force into the spotlight. The former tax consultant put it perfectly. There are celebrities who have hidden assets because they actively tried to hide them. And then there are celebrities whose assets are hidden because the assets themselves are inherently invisible. V falls into the second category, and that might actually make his overseas holdings the hardest to fully quantify of anyone in BTS. So there it is, number 5, the man with the Mona Lisa smile who collects art like other people collect memories, who moves through the world's most exclusive galleries and fashion houses like he was born in them, and whose international assets are cloaked not by secrecy, but by the very nature of what he collects. But here's the thought I want to leave you with. If V's hidden assets are this hard to trace because of the inherent privacy of art and luxury collectibles, what could the member at number 4 be doing that ranks them even higher? What kind of international financial moves put someone above an art-collecting Celine ambassador? The answer is coming, and it's gonna blow your mind.
Number 4, Jungkook. Let me ask you something. What were you doing when you were 25 years old? Maybe finishing college, maybe starting your first real job, maybe still figuring out how credit cards work. Cool, totally normal. Now let me tell you what Jungkook was doing at 25. He was buying entire buildings in Seoul, charting number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, closing a global ambassadorship deal with Calvin Klein, and, according to the insights from our former tax consultant, quietly assembling an international financial portfolio that would make investors twice his age look like amateurs. And that's what makes Jungkook's position on this list so absolutely terrifying. He's the youngest member of BTS, the maknae, the baby of the group. And yet, when it comes to hidden assets abroad, he's sitting at number 4, above his hungs Jin, Jimin, and V. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's strategy operating at a level that his baby face and doe eyes completely disguise. Let's start with what's publicly documented, because even the visible stuff is insane. Jungkook made headlines across Korean media when he purchased a luxury property in the Itaewon area of Seoul. And we're not talking about an apartment. We're talking about a standalone building in one of the most expensive commercial districts in South Korea. The reported price tag was around 7 billion won. That's roughly $5.3 million. And he bought it in cash. No mortgage, no financing. Cash. At an age when most people in the 20s are calculating whether they can afford avocado toast and rent in the same month, Jungkook was writing checks that cleared for entire buildings. But here's the detail that the former tax consultant found most revealing: the type of property Jungkook bought. It wasn't a residential apartment for personal use. It was a commercial building, a revenue-generating asset. That distinction is critical because it tells you exactly how Jungkook thinks about money. He's not buying properties to live in. He's buying properties to work for him. A commercial building generates rental income, appreciates in value independently of the owner's career, and serves as collateral for future financial leverage. This is not the behavior of a kid spending his idle money. This is the behavior of someone who has been coached, probably from very early on, to think about wealth creation the way institutional investors do. And when someone thinks like that domestically, the former tax consultant explained, they almost inevitably extend that thinking internationally. Because once you understand the concept of passive income through real estate, the next logical question becomes, where else in the world can I do this, and where can I do it better? Now let's talk about the Calvin Klein Global Ambassadorship, because this is where Jungkook's international financial story gets really interesting. When Calvin Klein signed Jungkook, it wasn't just a brand deal, it was a seismic event in the fashion industry. His campaign literally crashed the Calvin Klein website. Products he was photographed wearing sold out within hours across multiple countries. The commercial impact was so massive that industry analysts estimated Jungkook generated hundreds of millions of dollars in media value for the brand within the first few weeks alone. But what does that mean financially for Jungkook himself? The former tax consultant broke it down like this. A global ambassadorship at Calvin Klein's level, a brand owned by PVH Corp., a publicly traded American company, involves contract structures that are inherently international. PVH Corp. Operates in over 40 countries. Campaign activations happen simultaneously across North America, Europe, Asia, and beyond. Revenue attribution for the ambassador's impact gets calculated across multiple regional markets, and the compensation packages for deals of this magnitude often include components that go beyond a simple flat fee. We're talking about performance bonuses tied to regional sales metrics, equity participation or stock options in the parent company, and structured payments that flow through international entities for tax efficiency. The consultant pointed out that for a Korean national receiving significant income from an American corporation with global operations, the financial planning alone would require entities or accounts in multiple jurisdictions. At minimum, you'd expect structures involving the United States, where PVH is headquartered, and potentially Hong Kong or Singapore, which are common intermediary jurisdictions for managing cross-border payments between American companies and Asian talent. These aren't hidden in the sinister sense. They're just the plumbing that makes international commerce work. But they do create asset footprints in countries that fans would never think to look. And then there's Seven, and Standing Next to You, and the entire Golden album. Look, when Jungkook released Seven featuring Lotto and it debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, that wasn't just a musical achievement, it was a financial eruption. The streaming revenue alone from a #1 global hit is staggering. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Amazon Music, each platform pays through different international collection entities. Songwriting royalties flow through performing rights organizations like ASCAP and BMI in the US, PRS in the UK, Jazzrack in Japan, and Kamka in Korea. Each of these creates taxable events in different countries, and for an artist generating revenue at Jungkook's scale across literally every music market on the planet, the financial management infrastructure required is inherently multinational. The former tax consultant estimated that Jungkook's music income alone, separate from his grand deals in real estate, likely generates revenue streams in at least 15 to 20 different countries, of which would require some form of financial presence or collection mechanism. And here's the part that really elevates Jungkook on this list above V, Jimin, and Jin: the sheer velocity of his wealth accumulation. Jungkook is the youngest, which means he has the longest runway, and his advisors know that. When you're managing wealth for someone who's 27 years old, generating income at the scale of a Fortune 500 executive, and showing a clear preference for investment-grade assets like commercial real estate, your financial planning horizon isn't 5 years or 10 years, it's 40 years. 50 years. You're thinking about generational wealth. And generational wealth planning at this level almost always involves international diversification. You don't keep everything in one country because that's a concentration risk. You spread assets across jurisdictions with different economic cycles, different currencies, different legal protections. The former tax consultant suggested that someone with Jungkook's profile, young, massive income, demonstrated investment sophistication, global brand partnerships, and access to the best financial advisors money can buy, would almost certainly have begun building an international real estate portfolio, likely starting with markets he has personal connections to. Tokyo is an obvious candidate, given BTS's massive presence in Japan and the relatively easy property acquisition process for Korean nationals. The United States is another strong possibility, especially given his Calvin Klein relationship and the enormous amount of time BTS has spent in LA and New York. And emerging markets like Southeast Asia, where property prices are still accessible but appreciation rates are explosive, would be a logical target for someone thinking about long-term wealth building. What makes Jungkook's number 4 position so compelling is the combination of 3 factors: aggressive domestic investment behavior that signals sophisticated financial thinking, global brand partnerships that inherently create international financial structures, and youth that demands long-horizon wealth planning across multiple countries. He's not just earning internationally, he's being positioned by some of the smartest financial minds in the Korean entertainment industry for a future where his wealth operates independently of his fame across borders and currencies. The golden Maknae indeed. Except the gold isn't just in his talent, it's in bank accounts, properties, and financial structures scattered across the globe that most fans will never see and most media outlets will never report on. And the wildest part? He's only getting started. He has decades of earning power and investment growth ahead of him. By the time Jungkook is 40, the former tax consultant speculated his international asset portfolio could rival some of the most established business families in Korea. That's the trajectory he's on. And it all started with a kid from Busan who bought a building in Itaewon before he turned 26. So number 4 belongs to Jungkook, the youngest, the hungriest, and possibly the most strategically positioned member of BTS for long-term global wealth accumulation. But now I need you to sit with this question. If the Maknae, the youngest member, is already this deep into international financial infrastructure, what are the 3 hungs above him doing? What kind of hidden assets put you above a building buying, Calvin fronting, billboard charting financial prodigy? The answer starts at number 3, and I promise you, it's gonna change everything you think you know about BTS and money.
Number 3. Namjoon. Okay, stop everything, because what I'm about to tell you about Kim Namjoon requires your full, undivided attention. We've been climbing this list from Jin's quiet restaurant ventures through Jimin's luxury brand empire, past V's invisible art world assets, and over Jungkook's aggressive real estate plays. And each one has been progressively more sophisticated, more international, more layered. But number 3? Number 3 is where the game changes completely, because RM doesn't just have hidden assets abroad, he has an asset type that literally generates money in his sleep across every country on Earth 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and will continue doing so for decades after he stops performing. We're talking about intellectual property, and Kim Namjoon might be sitting on one of the most valuable intellectual property portfolios in the entire history of Korean music. Let's establish something first. RM is credited as a songwriter and producer on well over 100 BTS songs. Let that sink in. Over 100 songs. And these aren't album filler tracks that nobody listens to. These are songs that have generated billions of streams across every platform on the planet. Dynamite, Butter, Life Goes On, Spring Day, Fake Love, DNA, Boy with Love. The list goes on and on and on. Every single time one of these songs is played on Spotify in Brazil, on Apple Music in Germany, on YouTube in Indonesia, on the radio in Japan, in a shopping mall in Dubai, in a movie trailer in Hollywood, RM earns money. Not BTS, not HYBE, RM personally, because songwriting royalties are tied to the individual creator, not the performing group. And this is the part that the former tax consultant said most people fundamentally misunderstand about BTS's wealth distribution. The members who perform but don't write receive performance royalties, which are significant but finite. They're tied to the active commercial life of the recording. But the members who write, they receive both performance and compositional royalties. And compositional royalties have a
completely different lifespan. Under most international copyright laws, songwriting royalties last for the life of the creator plus 70 years. That means RM's songwriting catalog will be generating income not just for the rest of his life, but for 70 years after he passes away. His great-grandchildren will be earning money from Spring Day. That is generational wealth in its purest, most literal form. Now, here's where the international asset dimension explodes. Music royalties are collected through a global network of performing rights organizations and mechanical rights societies. In the United States, it's ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC for performing rights, and MLC for mechanical rights. In the UK, it's PRS for music. In Japan, JASRAC. In Germany, GEMA. In France, SACEM. In Australia, Opera Amcos. The list spans virtually every country with a functioning music market. And here's the critical financial detail. Each of these organizations collects royalties on behalf of songwriters within their territory, and those royalties are often held in accounts within that jurisdiction before being distributed. For a songwriter of RM's caliber, someone whose songs are generating revenue in literally every music market on Earth, the financial footprint created by these collection mechanisms is enormous. The former tax consultant explained that managing a songwriting catalog of RM's scale requires sophisticated international tax planning. You're dealing with income sourced in 50 or more countries, each with different tax treaties with South Korea, different withholding rates, and different reporting requirements. To optimize this, high-value songwriters typically establish publishing entities or collection companies in key jurisdictions, often the United States, the UK, and Japan, which are the three largest music markets in the world. These entities serve as intermediaries that collect royalties more efficiently, take advantage of favorable tax treaties, and consolidate income streams before remitting them back to the songwriter. These publishing entities are assets. They have value. They hold cash. They own or administer intellectual property rights that are worth millions, and they exist in countries outside of South Korea. That alone makes RM's international asset footprint fundamentally different and arguably larger than anything we've discussed so far on this list. But RM's story doesn't stop at music, because Kim Namjoon is also famously an art collector, and not a casual one. We talked about V's relationship with art at number 5, but RM's art collecting operates on a different axis. RM has been publicly, openly, almost evangelically passionate about art for years. He's been documented visiting major museums and galleries in virtually every city BTS has toured: the Art Institute of Chicago, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, galleries in London, Paris, Tokyo, and beyond. He's spoken in interviews about specific artists, specific movements, specific pieces with a level of detail that makes it clear he's not just appreciating art, he's studying it as a cultural practice and an investment vehicle. Korean media have reported that RM has purchased works by significant contemporary artists, and art world insiders have noted his presence at private viewings and gallery events that are typically reserved for serious collectors. Now, combine this with what we already discussed about the art market's inherent privacy, the use of free-port storage facilities, and the lack of public disclosure requirements for art transactions, and you begin to see how RM's art collection could represent a substantial pool of internationally held assets that exists entirely outside the public record. But here's what separates RM from V in terms of ranking. RM has both. He has the invisible, privacy-optimized art assets and the income-generating intellectual property infrastructure spread across dozens of countries. V's international assets are primarily physical and collectible: art, vintage items, luxury goods. RM's international assets include all of that, plus a perpetual motion income machine that creates new financial obligations and interests in foreign jurisdictions every single day, simply because someone, somewhere in the world, pressed play on a BTS song that he helped write. The former tax consultant described RM's financial profile as the most structurally complex in BTS, and possibly in all of K-pop, and he explained why. Most celebrities have active income from brand deals and performances, or passive income from investments. RM has both, operating simultaneously across more countries than most multinational corporations. His songwriting royalties create passive income streams in 50-plus countries. His art collection creates asset holdings in major art market cities. His HYBE shares give him equity exposure to a publicly traded Korean entertainment company. His solo music career under Indigo and Right Place Wrong Person adds another layer of international performance and mechanical royalties, and his brand partnerships and speaking engagements add another layer of active income flowing from international sources. Each of these layers creates its own set of international entities, accounts, and asset interests. Stack them all together, and you get a financial profile that would require an entire team of international tax lawyers and accountants to fully map. And that's exactly what RM has, a team of professionals whose entire job is to manage, optimize, and protect a global asset portfolio that most fans can't even begin to imagine exists behind that thoughtful museum-visiting, poetry-reading exterior. What makes RM's position at number 3 so powerful is that his wealth isn't just large, it's self-perpetuating. The buildings Jungkook buys will appreciate, sure. The brand deals Jimin signs will pay well, absolutely. But RM's songwriting catalog, it literally cannot stop making money as long as human beings continue to listen to music. It's an asset that works while he sleeps, while he's visiting a gallery, while he's hiking in the mountains, while he's reading Haruki Murakami. It works during recessions, during pandemics, during military service. It never stops. And because it generates income in every country with an internet connection, it creates an ever-expanding web of international financial interests that grows more complex with every passing year. The 148 IQ leader, the man who reads philosophy and writes songs that move millions, the quiet museum visitor who also happens to own one of the most valuable intellectual property portfolios in Asian entertainment history, generating income across more than 50 countries simultaneously, supported by international publishing entities and art holdings that exist in the most private corners of the global financial system. That's your number 3. And if your brain is already melting trying to comprehend the scale of this, I need you to ask yourself one very important question. Who on earth could possibly rank above Kim Namjoon? What kind of financial moves? What kind of international assets? What kind of hidden empire puts someone above a man whose money literally reproduces itself across the globe every single second? Number 2 is coming, and honestly, I don't think you're ready.
Number 2. Suga. I need you to lean in close for this one, because what I'm about to tell you about Min Yoongi, the man the world knows as Suga, the man the underground knows as Akusti, is a story that doesn't just explain hidden assets. It explains how a kid who grew up so poor in Daegu that he had to choose between eating lunch and taking the bus to school became one of the most quietly powerful financial figures in the entire Asian entertainment industry. And if that sentence alone doesn't give you chills, then you haven't been paying attention to who Min Yoongi really is. See, we just talked about RM at number 3, and I told you his songwriting catalog is a perpetual motion money machine generating income across 50-plus countries. That's true. That's real. That's extraordinary. But here's why Suga sits above him. RM's royalty income is overwhelmingly tied to one artist, BTS. The vast majority of RM's songwriting credits are on BTS tracks, which means his income stream, as massive as it is, rises and falls with the BTS catalog's commercial performance. Suga? Suga broke out of that box years ago. Min Yoongi doesn't just write and produce for BTS, he writes and produces for everyone. And that distinction is the single most important financial fact on this entire list. Let's run through the receipts. Suga has production and songwriting credits for IU, the biggest solo female artist in Korean history. He produced 8, a track that dominated charts across Asia and generated hundreds of millions of streams. He worked with Halsey, an American pop star on BTS's Boy With Love, and developed a creative relationship that bridged the Korean and American music industries. He produced for Psy, yes, the Gangnam Style Psy, contributing to a song that tapped into a fan base that spans every continent. He's worked with Max, Highs, Saran, Juice WRLD, and others.
Each of these collaborations isn't just a creative exercise, it's a financial transaction that creates royalty obligations in the specific markets where those artists are commercially active. And here's the crucial difference the former tax consultant highlighted. When you produce for artists across multiple labels, multiple countries, and multiple genres, your intellectual property portfolio becomes diversified in a way that's fundamentally different from even the most prolific single artist songwriter. RM's catalog is deep, but concentrated. It's all BTS, all filtered through one label structure, one group's commercial ecosystem. Suga's catalog is both deep and wide. He has royalty streams flowing from Korean pop through IU, from American pop through Halsey, from global viral culture through Psy, from independent hip-hop through his August D projects, and from BTS itself, where he's also a major credited songwriter and producer. Each of these income streams is collected through different publishing structures, different label agreements, different territorial collection societies, and different tax jurisdictions. The former tax consultant described Suga's royalty portfolio as the most diversified intellectual property holding I've seen from any individual in Korean entertainment. And diversification in financial terms means resilience. If one artist's music declines in popularity, the others continue generating. If one market has an economic downturn, the other markets compensate. Suga's income doesn't depend on any single song, any single artist, or any single country. It's a web that spans the entire global music ecosystem. Now let's talk about the August D project, because this is where the Suga financial story enters a completely different dimension. August D isn't just a stage name, it's essentially a solo brand and business entity. When Suga releases music as August D, the financial structure is fundamentally different from BTS releases. BTS revenue flows through HYBE's corporate structure and is distributed according to group contracts, but August D, the former tax consultant explained that solo projects by artists who are also signed to groups are typically structured with separate publishing agreements, separate distribution deals, and separate revenue splits. This means that August D's 3 albums, August D, D2, and D-Day, likely flow through a financial architecture that is partially or fully independent of BTS's corporate structure. And here's the kicker, the August D World Tour. When Suga toured the world as August D in 2023, selling out stadiums across Asia, North America, and Europe, the tour revenue generated was enormous. Concert touring is one of the most lucrative activities in the music industry. Artists typically earn 70 to 85% of gross ticket revenue after production costs. A stadium tour across multiple countries generates tens of millions of dollars, and that income is sourced in every country where a show takes place: the United States, Japan, the UK, Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore. Each show creates a taxable event in that country, and managing that requires financial structures in each jurisdiction. Touring income is often routed through touring companies or promoter entities based in the markets where shows occur, and the artist's share flows back through a chain of international entities designed to optimize tax treatment under bilateral tax treaties. The former tax consultant estimated that the August D World Tour alone would have created financial touchpoints, whether bank accounts, withholding accounts, or corporate entities, in at least 10 to 15 countries. And those touchpoints don't just disappear when the tour ends. They become part of Suga's permanent international financial infrastructure, available for future tours, future business activities, and future asset acquisitions in those markets. But now, let's get to the part that really sets Suga apart from everyone else on this list except one person: his mentality. Min Yoongi grew up poor, not middle class pretending to be humble poor, actually poor. He's talked about it openly: the financial stress, the part-time jobs, the moments when he questioned whether pursuing music was responsible when his family needed money. That kind of upbringing shapes your relationship with money in a way that no amount of financial education can replicate. People who grew up with scarcity don't spend the same way people who grew up comfortable do. They save more aggressively, they invest more carefully, they diversify more obsessively. They think about worst-case scenarios that wealthy-born people never even consider. The former tax consultant made a fascinating observation. In his experience, the clients who build the most robust international asset portfolios are almost never the ones who grew up rich. It's always the ones who experienced financial hardship early in life. because those clients don't take their wealth for granted. They treat every dollar as something that needs to be protected, multiplied, and positioned in ways that ensure it can never disappear the way their childhood security did. And Suga fits that profile perfectly. In Korea, Suga has made significant real estate investments. He's purchased premium properties in Seoul worth billions of won. But the former tax consultant noted that Suga's investment timing and property selection suggests a level of financial analysis that goes beyond just buy expensive apartment. His purchases have reportedly been timed around market cycles, showing an understanding of when to enter markets that reflects either excellent personal financial instinct or access to extremely sophisticated advisory services, probably both. Internationally, the consultant theorized that someone with Suga's profile, diversified global royalty streams, substantial touring income across multiple continents, a demonstrated scarcity-driven investment mentality, and the financial infrastructure that comes from operating as both a BTS member and an independent solo artist, would almost certainly have significant overseas holdings. The most likely categories would be international real estate and markets he spent significant time in, Japan and the United States being the most probable, investment accounts or fund participations in major financial centers, Singapore, Hong Kong, or US-based investment platforms, and, of course, the publishing and production entities needed to efficiently manage his sprawling international royalty income. What puts Suga at number 2, above RM, above Jungkook, above everyone we've discussed so far, is the lethal combination of 3 things: the most diversified intellectual property portfolio in the group, the financial mentality of someone who knows what it's like to have nothing, and a dual career structure, BTS plus a Goose D, that effectively doubles his international financial infrastructure compared to members who operate solely under the BTS umbrella. He's not just earning money in more places than anyone else on this list so far. He's almost certainly protecting and investing that money with a ferocity and discipline that reflects his life experience. The kid from Daegu who ate 1 meal a day to afford bus fare to his underground rap sessions now has assets generating income in dozens of countries, a production catalog that spans the biggest names in Korean and American pop music, and a financial empire that operates under 2 separate brands. The former tax consultant summed it up with one sentence that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Min Yoongi doesn't have hidden assets because he's trying to be secretive. He has hidden assets because he's the kind of person who would rather die than be financially vulnerable ever again. Every asset he holds abroad isn't an investment. It's a wall between him and the poverty he grew up with, and he's been building those walls in every country that would let him. That's your number 2, the producer, the survivor, the man who turned pain into platinum records and platinum records into a global financial fortress. But now, and I mean this with every fiber of my being, you need to prepare yourself for number 1, because if Min Yoongi, with his diversified royalty empire and poverty-forged investment mentality, is only number 2, then the person at the top of this list has done something so extraordinary, so massive, so far beyond what anyone expects that it redefines what hidden assets abroad even means for a K-pop artist. Who is it? You already feel it in your gut, don't you? Let's find out.
Number 1, J-Hope. And here we are, the summit, the peak, the name that the former tax consultant circled, underlined, and tapped his pen against 3 times before he even started talking. Number 1, the BTS member with the most hidden assets abroad. And when I tell you who it is, some of you will gasp. Some of you will nod slowly like you always knew, and some of you will have to sit down because the scale of what this man has quietly built across the globe will genuinely shake your understanding of who he is. It's Jungkook. It's J-Hope. The sunshine, the man whose smile could power a small city, the dance leader who radiates so much positive energy that you'd think his only hobby is spreading joy. And in a way, that's true. He does spread joy, but he also spreads assets across continents, across currencies, across financial structures so sophisticated that the former tax consultant called his portfolio the most comprehensive international asset architecture I've ever seen from an individual entertainer in Asia. Not Korea, Asia. Let that sit with you for a moment before we dive in.
Let's start with the foundation, because J-Hope's story doesn't make sense unless you understand what he built at home before he went global. In South Korea, Jungkook has assembled what multiple Korean financial outlets have described as the most aggressive and extensive real estate portfolio among all BTS members. And we're not talking about one or two luxury apartments. We're talking about a systematic, methodical acquisition strategy that spans multiple properties across premium Seoul districts. He purchased a luxury apartment in the Sungsu-dong area, a neighborhood that has transformed into Seoul's answer to Brooklyn, where property values have been climbing at rates that outpace almost every other district in the city. That acquisition alone was reported at approximately 6 billion won. But he didn't stop there. Reports have linked him to additional property investments in Songpagu and other high-value Seoul locations. Each purchase wasn't random. They were timed, located, and structured in ways that suggest a real estate strategy guided by professional investment advisors who understand market cycles, emerging neighborhoods, and long-term appreciation trajectories. The former tax consultant made a critical observation here. When someone demonstrates this level of systematic real estate investment behavior domestically, multiple properties, different neighborhoods, strategic timing, it is virtually certain that they have extended this approach internationally, because the logic is inescapable. If you understand that real estate in Songsu-dong will appreciate because of urban development trends, you also understand that real estate in equivalent neighborhoods in Tokyo, New York, Los Angeles, or London will appreciate for similar reasons. And if you have the capital, the advisors, and the infrastructure to execute domestically, extending internationally is just a matter of picking up the phone. And J-Hope has made a lot of phone calls. Now let's talk about Louis Vuitton, because this is where J-Hope's international financial story goes stratospheric. Every member's brand partnership is significant, but J-Hope's Louis Vuitton global ambassadorship operates on a level that is categorically different from every other brand deal on this list. Louis Vuitton is not just a luxury brand, it's the luxury brand. It's the crown jewel of LVMH, the largest luxury conglomerate in the world, a company with a market capitalization that has exceeded $500 billion. When Louis Vuitton select a global ambassador, they're not making a marketing decision, they're making a strategic investment, and the financial architecture of that relationship reflects its significance. The former tax consultant explained that Louis Vuitton ambassadorship contracts at the global level are among the most financially complex agreements in the entertainment industry. LVMH operates in virtually every country on Earth. Louis Vuitton has flagship stores in Paris, New York, Tokyo, London, Milan, Singapore, Dubai, Sydney, Sao Paulo, and dozens of other cities. Campaign activations happen simultaneously across all of these markets, and the compensation structure for a global ambassador of this magnitude typically includes layers that go far beyond a simple annual fee. We're talking about base compensation structured through LVMH's French parent entity, regional activation bonuses tied to sales performance in specific markets, Asia-Pacific, North America, Europe, Middle East. Product collaboration royalties if the ambassador is involved in capsule collections or special editions, equity-adjacent instruments like phantom stock options or brand equity participation agreements that align the ambassador's financial interests with the brand's long-term performance, and event appearance fees structured through local entities in whatever country the activation occurs. Each of these components creates financial obligations and asset interests in different countries. A campaign shoot in Paris generates income taxable in France. A store opening appearance in New York creates US-sourced income. A brand event in Tokyo triggers Japanese tax obligations. And to manage all of this efficiently, J-Hope's financial team would need entities, accounts, and advisory relationships in every major market where Louis Vuitton operates. The former tax consultant estimated that the Louis Vuitton relationship alone, before we even get to music, touring, or personal investments, could create financial touchpoints for J-Hope in 20 or more countries. And unlike a one-time brand campaign, an ongoing global ambassadorship creates permanent financial infrastructure. These aren't temporary accounts that get closed after a campaign ends. They're ongoing relationships with financial institutions, tax advisors, and legal entities in each jurisdiction that persist and grow over time, becoming the foundation for additional investment activities in those markets. But here's where J-Hope separates from literally everyone else on this list: Lollapalooza. In 2022, Jungkook became the first South Korean artist to headline a major American music festival when he topped the bill at Lollapalooza in Chicago. And from a financial perspective, this wasn't just a milestone, it was a declaration. It signaled that J-Hope had the infrastructure, the team, and the financial architecture to operate as a solo concert artist in the American market at the highest level. Headlining Lollapalooza required a US-based touring entity, American booking agents, US-based production companies, domestic insurance, union agreements with American entertainment labor organizations, and revenue collection through American financial institutions. All of that infrastructure, once built, doesn't disappear after one festival. It becomes the platform for future American concert activities, brand partnerships, and business ventures. J-Hope essentially built a permanent financial beachhead in the United States, and the former tax consultant noted that this kind of infrastructure typically leads to additional asset acquisitions in the same market. When you already have US-based entities, US bank accounts, US legal advisors, and US tax filing obligations, the marginal cost of purchasing US real estate or making US-based investments drops dramatically. You're already in the system. You already have the team. The only thing missing is the decision to deploy capital. And for someone with J-Hope's demonstrated investment appetite, that decision was likely made a long time ago. And then there's Chicken Noodle Soup with Becky G, a collaboration that might seem like just a fun song, but actually opened a different financial dimension. By partnering with Becky G, J-Hope tapped into the Latin music market, a market that is exploding globally and operates through distribution and collection networks that are largely separate from the traditional Anglo-American music industry. This collaboration created royalty streams in Latin American countries, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, Spain, that BTS other members simply don't have. Each of these markets has their own performing rights organizations, their own collection societies, and their own financial infrastructure. J-Hope's Chicken Noodle Soup royalties flow through these systems, creating financial interests in a part of the world that none of the other BTS members have significant exposure to. The former tax consultant highlighted this as a perfect example of J-Hope's genius. Whether intentional or instinctive, his creative choices have consistently expanded his financial footprint into new territories that diversify his overall portfolio. Now layer everything together, and you begin to see why J-Hope sits alone at number 1. His domestic real estate portfolio is the most extensive and systematic among all BTS members, indicating an investment discipline that almost certainly extends internationally. His Louis Vuitton ambassadorship creates permanent financial infrastructure in 20-plus countries through the world's most prestigious luxury brand. His Lollapalooza headline established a US-based financial beachhead that enables ongoing American business activities and asset acquisitions. His collaboration with Becky G opened Latin American royalty streams that no other BTS members have. His solo music career through Jack in the Box and Hope on the Street generates independent international royalties through separate publishing structures. His HYBE shares give him Korean equity exposure, and his personal investment philosophy, methodical, systematic, and aggressive, suggests that every single one of these international touchpoints has been leveraged as a launchpad for additional asset deployment in those markets. The former tax consultant's final assessment of J-Hope was devastating in its clarity. Jungkook has done something that very few entertainers in history have achieved. He hasn't just earned money internationally, he's So there you have it, the full countdown. 7 members, 7 financial profiles, 7 stories that prove BTS isn't just a music group, it's a collection of individual financial architects who've each built something extraordinary in the shadows of their fame. From Jin at number 7, quietly turning hospitality ventures into cross-border business assets that nobody writes headlines about, to Jimin at number 6, whose Dior and Tiffany partnerships alone create a financial web spanning from Seoul to Paris to New York without him even trying. From V at number 5, hiding wealth in the one asset class the world can't track. Art hanging in freeports and galleries that operate outside the spotlight. To Jungkook at number 4, the 20-something who buys commercial buildings in cash and whose Calvin Klein deal created financial infrastructure in more countries than most people will ever visit in their lifetime. From RM at number 3, the 148 IQ leader sitting on a songwriting catalog that generates money in 50 countries every single second of every single day and will continue doing so for 70 years after he's gone. To Suga at number 2, the kid from Daegu who turned poverty into the most diversified production royalty portfolio in Korean entertainment history because he swore he'd never be financially vulnerable again. And then J-Hope, number 1, the man who didn't just earn internationally, he systematically built an empire across every continent using Louis Vuitton, Lollapalooza, Latin music collaborations, and the most aggressive real estate strategy in the group to create a financial footprint so vast that even forensic accountants would need months to map it all. But here's what I really want you to take away from this list. This isn't a story about secrecy. None of these men are doing anything wrong. They're operating exactly the way anyone with their level of income, global exposure, and access to world-class financial advisors should operate. The real story here is about what happens when 7 kids from Korea, some from wealth, some from poverty, some from somewhere in between, are handed the keys to a global phenomenon, and each one, in their own way, decides to build something that lasts beyond the music. They didn't blow it on fleeting luxuries and call it a day. They invested, they diversified, they built structures that will protect their families for generations, and they did it so quietly that the world was too busy streaming their songs to notice. That former tax consultant said one last thing that stuck with me, and I think it's the perfect way to end this. People ask me which BTS member is the richest. That's the wrong question. The right question is, which BTS member has built the most resilient financial future? And the answer is, all of them. Each one in a different way, each one in different countries, each one using different strategies, but all 7 of them understood something that most people who get famous never figure out. Fame is temporary, but a well-built financial empire is forever. And on that note, if this list made you rethink everything you thought you knew about BTS and money, then it did its job. These 7 men aren't just artists, they're empire builders. And the empires they've built, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, smash the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.